The best new patient generator in decades is virtual reality for dental patients. Opera VR truly gives people a remarkable experience. We can completely transform the patient's awareness, transport them outside of the operatory. Go to operavr.operadds.com. Welcome to the Operatory Podcast, the podcast about burying the dinosaurs in dentistry, moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. With me today is the man, the myth, the patient perspective giving David Pryor.
Hey,
hello,
Bryan.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
You said that like you were from far away. Hey, Bryan.
Yeah, it's an illusion that you can do with a microphone. You can bounce around.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm driving the people on the board crazy.
Yes. and in my headphones. Thank you. Thank you. It's like left camera, right camera. Wayne's World reference. Really timely. Well, Dave, I'm excited, my man. We just launched Upgrade Dental.
Yes.
Entire platform about burying dinosaurs, moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. And really it is that we've got on there what's called the growth roadmap,
Yes.
which is how to grow your practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so on what Upgrade's growth roadmap really it is that we've found, as we've talked about on this podcast many times, the best way to grow your practice is through technology. And I don't think I've not shared this story on this podcast before, and it's a pertinent one to share it on, but it's about my first job coming out of dental school. And now Dave and I have been friends for many moons. That goes before there was a baby Bryan dentist, when Bryan was in college and stuff. And then I got out of dental school and I worked at a practice that was about 45 minutes away from what was my house, which that's a whole nother story. We bought our house and I didn't. My wife went to law school after I graduated from dental school. So if I hadn't passed boards, I didn't know how we were going to pay for our mortgage. So that was stressful. Luckily, I passed. But so we're not talking to you from a homeless place right now, which is good. But when I worked it was a group practice. I joined a group practice because I had no confidence in going out on my own initially. Coming out of dental school, I was like a beat puppy, going to every operatory. I just didn't have the self-confidence because I don't think the dental school instructors were masters of
Building that up.
building your ego. No. So I went and worked for a large group practice, and I worked with a dentist who everybody would want to be. She was phenomenal. She was super nice, like just super personable, great personality, huge practice, thriving practice, the kind that dentists would really want to have, right? She was working like 3 rooms at a time, but like thriving practice. Everybody loved her. She's great. The staff all loved her. It was one of the pinnacles, like in a relatively large group for this area. She was like one of the people who were up on a pedestal. And I spent about 25% of my time redoing work that she did.
Really?
Yes. And that was actually a great experience as coming out of school without much confidence, because frankly, I looked at her and I thought that is what I would, that's how you have a successful practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was true.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have also thought that clinical skills were much more important than they were. I think it was eye-opening. Coming out of dental school, I was this beaten kid, worried about my clinical skills, feeling like they weren't good enough. And then I was like, oh, that's what, gets you to have a big practice. And really the other thing that I noticed was leveraging technology, as we've talked about on this podcast a lot.
Yeah.
And so it was really, I think what first opened my eyes to, your clinical quality not equating to a successful practice.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
I've at the same time you were having that experience, I was having that same experience in my career, working with a colleague that was nowhere near as knowledgeable as good as I was, and we would go toe to toe in our career, and because he had the social aptitude that was just phenomenal, it just launched his career far beyond his technical skill sets.
Yeah, there's a lot of VHSs beating the crap out of betas out in the right. I mean, bring it back to technology, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's probably a third of our audience that gets it, but the
Wishful thinking.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, and so really what Upgrade Dental does is we're giving people not the clinical skills, although there is quite a bit in there. I mean, we have the ideal burr block and how to prep a tooth in 2 minutes, and there's a lot of clinical skills in there that augment, because you can't just obviously practice is more about to have a successful practice. It has to be much more than just technology, but that's the biggest lever that a dentist can start working on. You know, when I got out, I like to think of myself as a regularly personable guy, right? I'm not, you know, I certainly didn't build my practice on my charisma. Let's put it that way, right? And I have had a phenomenally successful career, and I attribute it to actually the steps that I took to build the technology. And the very first piece of technology that I very distinctly remember putting in place was this is totally dating myself, but the digital calendar, the scheduling, right?
Yeah.
And I remember having a consultant like come into my 800 square foot practice that was right next to Smoky Superette going, you got to get rid of this book. There's a huge book, you know, for those of you who didn't have one of these, it was about half the size of a desk, whereas you think like you had to like strain over to grab the edge of the paper and then reach over to the other side of the desk to put it down, because it was like this big week-long calendar.
So
right?
to really paint a picture for the younger audience, each page was 2 feet wide, and so it's 4 feet.
It's true.
Of paper across the desk with the calendar for 1 week.
Yes.
And then it's probably 1.5 feet tall. So I mean it's a tomb. It's not a book.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And so yeah, getting into go forth with your story, but yes, I completely remember that, and it was phenomenally huge step forward.
And think about a stack of pencils, because guess what? Patients change their appointments. I was like, I mean, it's just
and white out.
Yet here I was going, I can't get rid of this thing. What am I going to do to look at next week? I mean, it's like, I look back on it, I could not have been more wrong. But, you know, at the time, you like are clinging to the dinosaur technology that is this gigantic book, right? And so what I found was that that was probably the most stressful technology implementation, next to when I bought my first CAD/CAM machine after I just bought another practice. Financially, I've talked about it on the podcast before. I think I almost cried. I think a tear might have escaped my left eye a little bit, but that was all financial stress, which 3 weeks later never cared, because it was just so fundamentally positive in an ROI, right? And frankly, from then on, like no other technology have I ever stressed about other than those two. The very first one,
I remember both of those.
Yes.
I remember you being stressed out on both of those, and I do remember you going almost instant, like within the first month on the CAD/CAM, going, best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And kudos to my wife, because I called her from the trade show going, you know, I've been looking at this technology since I was in dental school. This was 2 years later. Somebody just bought it in my building. I went and looked at it. I was like, oh my God, I have to have this. I went to the trade show and I was like, I can't do this. So I called called up my wife and she was like, yeah, you know what you're doing. Just buy it. I'm like, I wouldn't have bought it if you like, that's the one time I think I've ever called her going, can I buy something? Before or since, sorry. Now I just buy stuff. But the, I'm the worst to buy presents for because it's like, oh yeah, I already have it. My point is that's getting rid of my 2.5 by a 1.5 book was the most stressful piece. After that, frankly, it was like, oh, this was totally transformative. Mm-hmm. Totally made my person at the front office way easier. Things are running smoother. And then I brought on the next piece of technology, saw that. And it's a flywheel or a snowball that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger with time. And so what we've done with Upgrade Dental is we've put together that timeline for you. We've say 1.1 is digital x-rays. Okay. If you're not using digital x-rays, you need to, because we have a whole nother, listen to that podcast. It's one of the first ones we did, right? If you're not using digital charts, right? Same thing. We talk that's might be 1.2. I don't remember what the timeline is, but it's wherever you are in your practice. If you're stuck back using a gigantic notepad, I wonder if there's any dentists out there still using
I talked to
notepads.
somebody yesterday.
There you go, man. It's not even on the timeline because I didn't think it happened.
Talked to somebody yesterday, and I'm like, how?
Yeah, we live in our own little world where we talk about technology every day. And that's the thing is once you implement the technology, you go, oh, why would I have patients every single day in my practice who say, I'm so glad that all dentists do it this way now. And I'm like, 12% of dentists do it this way, right? I mean, and that's the patient's perspective, right, man? I mean,
I mean, this is me calling these guys up that use us for email.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to a barber that had a notepad to write stuff down. That's maybe not true because there's like this like nostalgia.
Yeah, but you know it's going to get lost. I mean, like
True.
if the barber is taking notes on here's how we cut Bryan's hair, and that barber is absolutely going to go back in that 2 foot by 1.5 foot book to go look up your no way.
No, I don't even go to restaurants because they don't take open table, right? Because exactly right. Yeah. So I mean, so we give you the roadmap to kind of go from wherever you are to how far down that you want to go. And a bunch of, I mean, there's just a ton of stuff in there. We're really trying to give you $10,000 worth of value for $99, and it's really not only the timeline with like what order you should do things, but tell you what it is, why it matters, run it through a filter of how you should run every. We have there's another podcast we have on my decision filter, so we run it through that. And then give you implementation tools because every piece of technology, I don't care what it is. If you're taking, I had so much pain taking that calendar from paper to electronic, right?
Yep.
I had to buy a computer for the front desk. But like just the mental barrier to go from paper to that, even though it was better in every single way, I had to learn how to right click to reschedule appointments, that kind of thing. That's going to be true of any piece of technology. If there's going to be some change that you have to manage in your office, and so we give you a checklist of how to do it, implementation guidelines, and then for each specific technology, what to expect while you're implementing it, and then sort of the size of the prize on the other end, right? Because I think a lot of people, I mean, how do you quantify not having a paper schedule? Well, that's what we do for you, and we do it over time because that's the other thing is that I've been using computers doing my scheduling across multiple practices for the last 19 years now, right? So if you equate to that first day, it's going to be a negative.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. I mean, that I have captured because I switched that day from paper to computer scheduling.
Yeah. Creating efficiencies. I mean, everything you've done in terms of the software company, that's all you're doing is creating efficiencies and passing that on to other people to give them the opportunity that you have. Yeah.
You take giving somebody a clipboard and then having the front desk person need to scan that and shred it and put it into the chart and having it all happen automatically from a form.
Yeah.
Right. One time.
Right.
Then you look at a day.
Yeah.
And then you look at over the course of the next year, I mean, you could totally trim down, not just trim down your team members up at the front office, which right now, depending on where you live, but I think there's unemployment is quite low. So finding good people is hard. But then if you find somebody good, you know what they don't want to be doing? Scanning crap. Right. They want to be doing things that are much more impactful to the practice.
Yeah.
Right. So to find out more, go to upgradedental.com. I also want to remind you to rate and review us wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you have suggestions or comments, please visit theoperatory.com and drop us a line. Again, I'm Dr. Bryan Laskin, host of The Operatory. Thanks for listening. I look forward to speaking with you next week.